Then we want to talk about the temple site itself, the Temple Mount itself. On the Temple Mount, that is God's chosen place. He says, I've chosen this place to place my name there. That's where I want you to worship me. That's where Isaac was almost offered by Abraham, Mount Moriah. That's the Temple Mount. That's where Melchizedek was, the priest, the king priest. He was the king of righteousness. He was the king of Salem, Jerusalem. This is God's place where people will ultimately worship him, where Jesus will rule from eventually. But in the meantime, there have been placed on that mountain impediments to people worshipping God, called in Daniel's prophecy the Abomination of Desolation. The Abomination of Desolation is something which is placed on God's holy mount, which is idolatrous, which is desecrating, which is astonishing, and people say, I can't worship God there. Physically they can't, and mentally they can't, because it's a desecrated place. The Abomination of Desolation. So without turning these up, and you can have a look at these later on, Daniel chapter 11 talks about the abomination that maketh desolate, which was put in that place by Antiochus Epiphanes, that terrible anti-Semitic ruler, in 167 BC. They shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, that is, God's temple place, take away the daily sacrifice, and place the abomination that maketh desolate. That's what it's called. We'll talk a bit more in a moment to explain it. Daniel chapter 9, the next chapter after the one we read. He shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. For the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, talking in terms of the temple again, until the consummation, that is, when the Lord Jesus Christ returns, and that determined is poured upon the desolate. So in the meantime, God's anger is poured upon his people, Israel, and they have been desolate, unable to worship in Jerusalem all those years. And then in Daniel chapter 12 verse 11, there's an abomination that maketh desolate, which will stop people worshipping there for 1290 days, meaning 1290 years. And that happened in 688 AD, when the Dome of the Rock was put on the Temple Mount, and people can't worship God there anymore. There's no temple there. It's the Dome of the Rock that dominates that space. So just to explain that a little more, in Daniel 11, BC 167, Antiochus Epiphanes captured Jerusalem. He put up a statue in the temple to the god Zeus, right there in the temple holy place. He took a pig, the most horrible thing you could think of as far as Jewish worshippers are concerned, and sacrificed it on the altar to defile the altar. So what happened was, it only lasted 3 years, fortunately, and the Maccabees, very strong Jewish family, got a very strong group together to fight off the Grecian rulers at that time and drive Antiochus and his people out of the city, and they were able to restore worship there. So that abomination of desolation didn't last for very long, but it was the first of them, and there were more to come. So 3 years later they took back the temple, they reconsecrated it and established the Feast of Hanukkah to celebrate that reconsecration of the temple, still kept today. In Daniel chapter 9, Jesus has been referring to this, and he says, the abomination that maketh desolate, spoken by Daniel the prophet, stands in the holy place, and that's your sign to leave Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. So he tells his disciples, look out, the Roman legions are going to come, basically. They're going to take over the temple. Time for you to flee to the mountains. And the Roman legions destroyed the temple. That was the second abomination of desolation. And the third abomination of desolation is set up. Daniel chapter 12 and verse 11, which the word indicates there's a standing up of something that will stay there a long time. And that is the Dome of the Rock, which was built there by the Muslims in 688 AD. So the Jews can't worship there. Haven't been able to all that time. The abomination of desolation. The word abomination in the Hebrew means something detestable, disgusting thing. Always refers to idols, and often when they're located in the temple area, as in Jeremiah there, they set their abominations in the house called by my name. Even the Jews put idols in the temple. But This is talking about the little horn power and all the what times it creates abomination on the temple site. The word desolate doesn't mean desolations as if, ground's been burnt, you can't grow anything, that sort of desolation, or all the buildings knocked over, it's all desolate. No, it's actually a word which is a reaction by the people to the abomination. Their reaction is that they're stunned, they're appalled, they're astonished, they can't imagine how this could have happened. And they feel empty and desolate and cannot worship their God. So the abomination of desolation has been put there as a punishment against Israel by people who God has set up to stop worship there, because after all they're not worshipping in spirit and in truth. That's yet to come. So the Gentile conquerors, called the little horn of the goat, king of the north, have set up these abominations, and now we have one that's been there for well over 1290 years, in fact. So they've made it impossible for the people of Israel, among them true worshippers, to worship in that place. So the pig offered there, 167, AD 70, Jesus speaks of it and says, you read Daniel the prophet, you know what I'm talking about, and in AD 688. So what's going to happen? These desecrations are going to be taken away, and the temple of the Lord Jesus Christ is going to be established there in that place very soon. So the setting up there, we know that building very, very well. It won't last much longer. And for 1290 days from its establishment to 1978 began this time from which the worship will come to the Temple Mount. What happened in 1978? The Camp David Accords, where peace was made the first time between Israel and its neighbours, and the Egyptian president Anwar Sadat was the first Muslim to say, we want to open up the holy places in Jerusalem so that everybody can go there to worship, not just the Muslims. That was quite a landmark letter that he wrote via Jimmy Carter to Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel at the time. We want to work towards that. It's the first time that a Muslim had ever said anything like that, a Muslim leader. Of course, most of his Muslim friends didn't agree with him, and he was assassinated soon afterwards, but that was the first time, that was the beginning of the idea of opening up Jerusalem for other worship, including the worship of the Jews. So we are now living in the time of the end, which began in 1917, where in another talk we'll go through and talk about the 7 times prophecy of Daniel chapter 4, which is 7 years of 360, 2,520 days, which ended in 1917. That's the time of the kingdoms of men as they were revealed to Nebuchadnezzar with Daniel's dream. So that was the beginning of the time of the end, when the king of the south, the power out of Egypt, the British and Australians and others with them, pushed the Jews out, and Jerusalem was opened up for its future. Then 1948, the end of the 1260 days, a period of scattering of Daniel chapter 12, from 688 to 1948, we get to the end of the period of scattering, that is, Israel's declared a nation. 1967, which is the time of the treading underfoot of the little horn of the goat from 333 BC, when Alexander the Great rose to his power, to 1967. Now we've seen the 1978 beginning of access to the Temple Mount, not yet fully implemented, but the Jews have been going up there and more and more and more in recent years to worship. So we can see the abomination of desolation, the Dome of the Rock, is coming to an end. And when it'll be that it actually comes to an end, we can't be sure. Whether the Jews will take over the Temple Mount as a result of this Hamas war when it finishes, or whether it'll wait until the Lord Jesus Christ returns and the great earthquake, we don't know. But the end of the abomination of desolation is in sight. And then in 2023, blessed is he who waits, says Daniel chapter 12, till the 1335 days, is the great battle which is happening now in Israel between Hamas and Israel. And the Hamas flag, look at the Hamas flag. The Hamas flag, in the centre of the Hamas flag is the Dome of the Rock. Now Hamas is centred down in Gaza. You know, a couple of hours drive away from the Dome of the Rock. But their target is to save the Dome of the Rock for the Muslims. They know it's under threat. They know that Israel has its eye on sovereignty over the Temple Mount. What will happen to the Dome of the Rock? Well, that's the battle for Jerusalem that's happening right now. Why did the Hamas people call their operation, beginning on October the 7th, Operation Al-Aqsa Flood? Al-Aqsa is their name for the mosque on the Temple Mount, right alongside the Dome of the Rock. So the battle is about ownership of the Temple Mount, of the place that God has chosen where his true worshippers will worship. And that's going to be very soon. It's all happening. So Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, Zechariah chapter 12 says, I'll make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people in that day. And isn't it? Isn't it? You know, everybody who wants to do something about Jerusalem finds that they haven't got the answers. And it creates problems and issues and wars. And you can see there the Jewish place of worship, the Wailing Wall. They would love to be able to go up and build a temple on where the Dome of the Rock is now. That won't happen. But when Jesus returns, it will, because the next temple there will be built by the Lord Jesus Christ and his saints, and we hope to be among that great number.